Good to go, Marie.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to our sort of unusually scheduled meeting for March 2nd for the Design Advisory Panel meeting. And I'll call the meeting to order. And just a little reminder that this meeting is live streamed and video recorded for the public. Start off, is there any late items that people would like to add to the agenda? Any of the panel members? Oh, okay, I'm just going to add one item. I have to be away on March 10th, so we'll discuss an alternate chair at the end of the meeting under new business. So if we can have a motion to adopt the agenda. Oh, also there was an amendment to our minutes. So there was a revised minutes that was sent around. Did everybody get that from our group? Jason, you're not nodding your head. Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so we can maybe have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended and with the new item of business. Can I have a motion from somebody?
Can I just, Madam Chair, can I just jump in quickly?
Sure.
What was the amended, because I went through it and I was trying to find what the amendment was to the minutes. So can you kindly explain?
Oh, there were corrections. There was an error that mentioned that there was townhouses on Chapel Street rather than Skinner Street. There was something missed in the staff question. So it was just little items throughout the minutes that were missing. So they were corrected.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. So a motion to adopt the minutes as amended and with the new business item, Kevin, and the seconder, Jason, all in favor? Great, okay. All right, so this evening we've got two presentations. Our first one tonight is development permit for 223 Victoria Road, and planner Sadie Robinson will introduce that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Development permit application DP 1257 is for a fourplex with one live-work unit and 3 compact residential units located at 223 Victoria Road. The subject property is located at the western edge of the South End neighborhood between Milton Street and Farquhar Street. It is zoned DT12 Gateway and is designated urban node in the official community plan. It falls within Development Permit Area 9 for multifamily in the South End Neighborhood Plan. The South End Neighborhood Plan Urban Design Guidelines and the General Development Permit Area Guidelines apply to the proposed development. There are 4 proposed variances associated with the proposal as follows. Minimum front yard setback to reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 6 meters to 3.2 meters, a proposed variance of 2.8 meters. Number 2 is maximum fence height to increase the maximum permitted fence height from 1.8 meters to 4.6 meters on the north and south side yards. This represents a proposed variance of 2.8 meters. Number 3 is the required parking spaces to reduce the minimum required parking from 6 spaces to 4 spaces, a variance of 2 parking spaces. And the 4th is small car parking to increase the maximum allowable percentage of small vehicle parking spaces from 40 to 50%, allowing 2 of the 4 proposed parking stalls to be for small vehicles. The applicant may begin their presentation.
Hey, Joyce, before you start, Brad's joining us. He was just on another development permit with the city of Victoria. Guys, I keep apologizing. All our stuff asks for variances, but there's no other builder that's as aggressive as we are to try to do meaningful infill in the old core, in the old downtown area. And when we're dealing with 33-foot lots, very narrow lots, for zoning that usually has a 55 or 60-foot wide lot. We feel bad that we keep asking for these variances, but they are meaningful and I hope well thought out infill. I know, I feel bad every time we come and I compare ourselves to everybody else. We always have 3 or 4 variances, but we're dedicated to the downtown core, and we have 15 DPs somewhere in the process right now to help revitalize that area with meaningful infill. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
And I'm in Mexico, so
there's our introduction to the fact that this is a small infill site. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Everyone can see the PDF. Yep. Okay, great. Okay, so Doug's introduced us to this very small, tight site once again. We're doing infill. It's 4 units, and then the front unit facing Victoria is a live work unit. So the portion hitting at the street is actually the work portion, and then you have a stair up to your unit. In terms of the site itself, I'll kind of zoom in here on so we can see the aerial. You can see it's a tight, long site, and we've got a scattering of multifamily and single family homes and a mixture of commercial behind us. Our main access into the building, into the live work, is here along Victoria, but the access to the parking is off of the lane in the rear. In terms of, before I get off the cover sheet, and in terms of the data and information, I think the variances were really, were already sort of described to you, but we are asking for some variances. But in terms of some of the big ones that we normally are comparing to, our floor areas right at what's allowed, our lot coverage is well under what would be allowed, and our height is actually well under what would be allowed as well. So the variances with cars are a challenge just because of the width and the location of the site, like it being sort of narrow and long. We've got that angled parking again. And then due to the fact of the slope, we do have some fencing or retaining wall variances, and we feel like that those are just kind of innate with the nature of the slope on the site. And the front yard variance as well. So they are asking us to dedicate or prepare for a lane widening in this location. So we are asking for the front variance as well. And in this situation, once you get the parking and the building in, it's sort of what you're left with. And this is what we've tried our best to do, is create a usable, nice project here on Victoria. So this is just zooming in. We do have a roof deck on the top, and it'll have beautiful views of the water. That's our main amenity on the site. It being a small site, it doesn't really allow for us to put a sort of a big amenity down at the ground level. And I was going to use Brad's plan because it's got lots more texture and information and interest than mine. But basically here on the site plan, you can see the access that we're getting off the lane. In order to get parking to work at all on the site, because of the width of the site, we've had to do angled parking that would then back out onto the lane, and then you would drive forward. In terms of along Victoria Road, we've got access into the main part of the residential building, and then access into what is the work portion of the live work unit. We've got bike storage along the sides, and mechanical and trash rooms along the other side here as well. And there is a connection from Victoria Road to the lane to provide residents the ability to go from the parking into the building itself. And let's see here. I'll go up. When we get to the next level, basically the programmatic diagram of this building is on each floor we have 2 units, 2 1+den units. And then on the very top level, we have our roof deck amenity that allows us, like I was saying, a wonderful ocean view. I think I'll dive a bit into the sort of scale and scope of this project. I do realize that our building is taller than our neighbors. Height is actually one of the things we're not asking for a variance on. We're actually quite a bit under height. And what we've tried to do is, just given the nature of a lot of these infill sites, where we're actually pushing the boundaries of the setbacks just to get them to actually fit, we get these more boxy-like forms. And in the past, trying to apply a traditional look to them has been a challenge, but in this case, we are not required to do a traditional form and character because we're not in the Old City Quarter. So our approach here was to actually kind of try to integrate these 2 things. Use the slope roofs that we see in a lot of the adjacent properties, but then meld it into a bit of a more modern style. and I think we've done a nice job of that, of using that sort of more modern form that you would see in an architecture of this style, and changing the materials at certain locations along the sides of the building. And you can see from this angle that, you know, maybe in the future, who knows how long that will be, that this site will become more dense and we won't see the side of the building. But I know for the immediate future, it's more likely that we'll be seeing the actual side of our building for quite a while. And so we have tried to embrace that and integrate some of this form that we are using as our concept for the building itself and apply it onto the side. This is actually the access you get off the roof deck. I'm going to switch to the Sketchup model. Can everyone see the Sketchup model? Yeah, okay, great. So I think this just does a little bit better three-dimensional job of being able to see the site. So we've got access here to the residential on the right, and then access through to the work portion of the live work unit here on the ground floor. I'll let Brad explain some of the exterior landscaping, but we're trying to treat these two things a bit different so that you can identify them as different components.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see it pop in. Okay, that's great.
We're using this more modern roof, sort of modern architectural language, but we're still trying to use a pitched roof to mimic some of the neighborhood roof slopes and shapes. And then as we move around, you'll see that we've integrated that form once again on the side of the building as our roof access to the rooftop deck here in the back. And then in the back here, you can see we've integrated in the parking. Some of the parking is actually tucked under the back of the building, and then some of it is just surface parking exposed to the outside. And then we've done a very similar sort of architectural feature on this side of the building as well. We're obviously limited in some of our window openings because of the unprotected openings calculations, but I think that we've been able to get as many as possible on the side of the building. And we've attempted to change the pattern and the roof pitch and scale here so that we do get some stepping and some different heights here. And the last thing I just wanted to mention was in regards to parking, because it seems to be an issue on a lot of these small sites. If we, in this live work unit, one of our options is to actually go to a home-based business. And in that case, we wouldn't be required to have parking spaces, and we wouldn't be the 2 cars over that we're asking for the variance. We think that this site is better suited for a live work scenario, and that's why we've asked for the variance on the parking, because we feel that it's better for this project and better for this location. But if parking is an issue, our backup option is to make this a home-based business, and then we wouldn't need to be asking for that parking variance. I think that wraps up my description. I can't see everybody. Is Brad, are you in the meeting?
I'm here.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch back to PDF, go back to your plan, and let you go.
Thanks. So, hi, everybody. Joyce has explained the project really well. I just want to comment that, like the other ones that are similar that we've been doing, we've put a lot of attention into the texture and materiality of the landscape because we want to try and create as much greenery and livability as possible for these little projects. So you can see on Victoria Road, we've got 2 trees, one large tree in the corner that will kind of soften the whole front of the project, and a smaller tree in a container which will kind of define the entry to the one side. And then we have got a variety of different textured materials on Victoria Roadside, defining the 2 entrances slightly separately and differently. One's kind of an enclosure, like a garden with its own little planting. And the other one's a little bit more with modern slabs coming up to the entry. And then those transition into stepping stones down the side yards, which are basically for infrequently used routes around the building, but they'll give us the opportunity to have greenery in amongst the stones and stuff. Then coming around to the back of the project, we have this angle parking that Joyce explained, and what that does for us is it allows us to plant columnar trees in the serrations of the parking along the fence line, so we can soften that edge between the neighbors and ourselves in front of each of the car stalls. And we also have one larger tree on the lane, not as big as the one in the front, but still we have that. And we have some permeable paving for the parking. We've got the stalls in concrete, and then the rest of the drive aisle is, because it's so small, we've been able to put that into a permeable paving for stormwater control. And we've on this project we've designed kind of a funky fence with horizontal boards that kind of keeping with the modern style of the building. And on the roof, you can see this one has a roof deck, which is again dealt with in the idea of having several kinds of materiality. One's a wood decking material for the majority of it, where people would have their tables and chairs, and then a paved area that leads to the building near a barbecue with some arbors for shade. And the two different materials, one is easy to clean, the other one's obviously more soft and warm and welcoming. And then those two spaces are divided in this case by a raised precast planter box, or maybe a fiberglass planter box, which will contain a small tree like a Japanese maple, and that will create the centerpiece to the garden, and it'll actually feel like a landscape space because of that. I think that's about it.
Okay, so that's all for your presentation then, Joyce? Thanks. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the staff about this project? Yes, Jason.
Yeah, I just want clarification from staff around the front setback issue. So there's a 2.5 meter setback for road expansion is the idea, and then 3.5 meters being requested for it to be the permanent setback after expansion. Is that the idea?
So thank you, through the chair. At this point, there is a minimum 3.5 meter setback required as the base requirement. And then the 2.5 meters is additional required for future road width, should it be necessary. And then at this point, what the request is, it does not account for the additional road width, I believe. We need to clarify that further with the applicant through internal referrals, whether or not what they're proposing would be sufficient to cover the road dedication aspect.
Right. So the 3.2 meters being provided currently would, after road widening, effectively be a 0.7 meter setback.
That's correct.
As opposed to a 3.5. Okay. Okay. And the intention for that 2.5 meters by the city is to allow for expansion, and then create a new relationship to the street from the buildings with the 3.5 in addition to the 2.5.
Yes.
So this would preclude that. Okay. Thank you.
Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I have one question for Sadie. With this road dedication, is that going to allow, is there any way that street parking could be affected by that? Is street parking can always be in the future plan for Victoria Road?
Through the referral process, our engineering department would specify the road classification, and that would speak to whether road parking would be provided. I don't know at this time if it would have future street parking after that road has been widened.
Okay. One other thing I noticed on a side note that Mark Warbrick is here, and I just was curious if the applicant was wanting him to comment in any way about stormwater management and the civil stuff. So if you could just ask the design team, I would appreciate it.
In the comments, in the letter comments, there was potential questions related to stormwater management. So he's here to answer any questions anyone might have.
Okay, thanks. Elenia, did you have something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify that through the development permit, we're not seeking road dedication. What they would be doing is just preserving the space through additional setback for future road widening. So it's not a formal road dedication or taking it this time, just the setbacks.
Okay, and I'd like to just clarify, there is parking on Victoria on that side, isn't there? Because all the pictures, when I drove down the road, people are parking on the boulevard, so I wasn't...
Yeah, sort of parking.
I think it's informal parking.
Yeah, okay. Just checking. Okay, great. Well, okay, so maybe Jason, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. The parking variances don't particularly bother me, nor do the fence. I do really appreciate the effort that's gone into the massing. I think following the simple gable form and carrying that through, I like the no eaves aesthetic to it. I think it's very sleek. I am a bit concerned about the proportions of it and how tall it is compared to its neighbors and how close it is to the street edge. I would not be particularly inclined to the front setback relaxation just because of how it would be a significant impact and preclude the city from making those adjustments in the future. However, if my colleagues were so inclined as to approve it, I would say at least review maybe the height of that front part of the building. It looks like there's opportunities for the ceilings of those front units to come down a little bit, so it could be less of a shadow or less of a mass to the neighbors. But otherwise, that's my primary concern, is just how close it is to the street and the resultant impact to the neighborhood. So that's all I have to say.
I'd like to interject there. That whole area is zoned the same zone that we're applying for. So we've got the neighbors you're referring to are derelict homes that are ultimately going to either stay derelict homes or very poor homes, or we're going to encourage some density. And the zoning for that area encourages density. So would you like fourplexes going in there to have walkability of the city, or do you not?
Yeah, I think our role here is just to comment on the form and character within the neighborhood context. So
I'm sorry, I get excited about this issue of being the infill guy. I mean, we're trying to build walkable infill.
Yeah, we understand that.
In zoning that the city has labeled multifamily.
Yes. Okay, Kevin, would you like to add your comments?
Did Jason have anything else to add?
I'm not opposed to density by any means. It's the extent that it's coming out to the front and the impact of the massing. That's my primary concern. I mean, looking at it, you could actually achieve the same design and shift it back. You would lose the live work component of it, but you could readjust the massing and still achieve the 4 units on the site.
Sorry, Jason, let me interrupt.
Sure.
We are forced, that zone is forcing us.
Madam Chair, if I could
Yes.
call point of order here, I would just appreciate if dialogue went through the chair and was not cross debate. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yes, Doug, if you could just hold your comments, maybe we'll let the panel give their comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if Jason had any more questions for the applicant before I jump in.
No, please proceed, Kevin.
Okay,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Joyce, Brad, and even though Mark didn't get a chance to speak, I might want to ask him some questions about what's going to be happening with the stormwater management. I think the team has done very well with this project. I love the form and character, the roof decks, how you sited the buildings. I, just like Jason, I did give some thought to, whether or not you can shift the building further back from the street, but I like street presence in buildings. And obviously this building is over 9 feet under height. And that's to the highest roof, which is the roof in sort of that small little middle section. So I think in the future with sites around this building, I think a lot of applicants might not only try to work to the maximum 66-foot height or whatever it is, but even ask for variances on it. So I'm not really worried about the massing. And I personally like street presence. I like pushing buildings closer to the street. And I think with Brad's effort and how he's designed the front patio and the trees and everything, I fully support all the variances. The only one that I would say that if the applicant would really want to try to strengthen their rationale would be to make the 2 small parking stall make them both electric charging stations instead of just one. So that would be my recommendation. All the other ones, variances, I fully support. I really like how the applicant worked to the within 0.1% of the gross floor area or floor area ratio, and really used up the density of the site. They could have easily added another floor and reduced the footprint, reduced the front setback, but it's just going to make the building even taller. So after I thought about it, I fully support the rationale for everything they've done, and I like that they've kept it under height. With form and character, the only things that I'm kind of struggling with is I'm looking at your material board, Joyce, and there's the I guess you'd call it the main wall gable and wall fins. On your renderings and stuff, they look like they're black in color, but on your color board, they look like they're more like gray. So can you clarify that for me?
Yeah, the intention was to get them as close to that iron ore that you see. So it's not a black, it's like a step down from black and gray.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm curious about is that color and the color of the other one of the other claddings is almost identical, and whether you want to consider some sort of contrast there, that because like in renderings it looks black, the roof looks like it's black, and it kind of all blends together. So I'm assuming the roof shingle color is more like a darker black color, correct?
Yeah.
And then the cladding on the inside of that, the main front feature, it's going to be more like a gray color, correct?
Correct.
And then the fascias and the fins that come down, they're going to be more like a gray color too. So whether or not you might want to try to find a medium that's more in between those two colors, because it's difficult to look at these copies because they don't always come off accurate. But you just consider the contrast of that. And the only other thing is that roof on the front that has the fins on it, that is shingled roof, correct? Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You have to have a gutter on the edge of that, correct? Is that right?
Yes.
And so and you're going to try to find a color where the gutter would match the fascia. Is that what you're trying to do there? Try to make it obvious. You're going hidden gutter.
Well, we've discussed some of the details around how to do the gutter system there, but some of that will have to get, it's the next step of development. But the intention of it is to make it blend as much as possible.
Yeah, and it's funny because you don't see the gutters on there in your renderings, and we all know how gutters look. And when you look at your renderings and it's all one clean line coming down, it looks really clean, but inevitably it's not going to be that way. But the only other question I have about form and character is the first floor facing the front, are you using the hardy wood finish on that?
Yes, that was our intention.
Just in floor. And did you give any thought about carrying that up through that main section of the balconies and all the cladding of that instead of having the vinyl on that?
No, but it's something that we could consider.
Yeah, because it's funny that on the rear of the building, on the lane side, you have a lot of that hardy wood finish on it, coming down the side, but I don't see a lot of it on the front. So maybe consider that. I don't, unless somebody else wants to jump in on that and recommend it. It's not necessarily a recommendation, but unless you do something different, I think with the what I mentioned earlier about the two gray colors on the front, I think you might need to consider something different there. But I really like the form and character and what you've done with the building. I don't mind the height because it's still 9 feet under height, so I think you did a really good job with that. Brad, are there going to be there's going to be bike racks in the front, correct? I see a bench, but I don't see any bike rack.
Yeah, there's going to be bike racks. I'm just going to see if I can find it. Maybe I didn't show it, but we definitely have to have bike racks.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
Yeah.
we will have.
I believe it's called the Katsura tree.
Yep.
That's your main anchor on the front, right? The big tree.
Right.
And also on the back lane.
The one on the front is actually going to be a Norway maple.
Okay.
Crimson King, which is purple.
Okay.
This is a distinctive purpley tree. And then Katsura will be in the back.
On the lane, right on the lane.
A little narrower profile, so and it's very tough, so it'll do well in the back. And then the ones on the side, I'm thinking of some, it's not on my plant list, but I'm thinking of some Amanagawa cherry, which are very skinny flowering cherry trees.
Okay. Yeah, I liked your landscape concept. I think you did a very nice job with your hardscapes and your softscapes, and really nice job. And if Mark is there, if he has anything to add about the stormwater management and plans for that, I would like to hear it.
We just have to, based on the calculations we've done so far, store about just under 2 cubic meters of water on this one because of the small size of the site. So we'll work with Brad to figure out if that's going to be structure under the trees or structure under the parking or a rock pit. We haven't got to that level of detail yet, but if we use rock and or structured soils, the volume of material is about 5.2 cubic meters that's required. So there's ample area to accommodate that behind the building. And then the storm sewer off-site has to be extended slightly because it doesn't come up close enough to provide service yet. So there'll be a storm sewer main extension in the lane.
Okay. Thanks, Mark, and well done, all you guys. Like just those minor things, maybe considering adding a second electric charging station, and just my comments about the front facade and with relation to the materials and maybe a little bit more contrast in that. But all in all, a very, very nice project. Thank you.
Okay, Kate, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I don't really have much to add. I do have similar concerns as Jason around the setback, but I can see what your constraints are, and I can see that down the road there's some not new but not old development that has a similar setback to you. So I can see that may be the consistent setback for that street. And given that, I think I can accept it. But I do find, regardless of that you're under height, some even considering fiddling with the colors or textures or materials of the front may help in reducing the mass, the feeling it presents currently on the street, because it is very overwhelming and it's hard when you're in a transitional neighborhood. But I think there are still some subtle things you probably could do to look at how that doesn't feel like one big wall as it sort of is presented now. So I think that would be my only suggestion. I think that was in the staff comments, just looking at ways to, maybe you're just visually making it look like it's stepping back, even if it's not massing, actually stepping back. I'm not sure. I'm not the architect, but, and I don't have much to say about the landscape. Brad, you're extremely limited. So I think you've done a fine job in putting in the trees. But I did actually, once you said that the Norway maple was on the front, I think that would add to the dark quality. And maybe you might want to consider a lighter leafed tree in contrast to the building, depending on where how the building materials land.
Yeah, I could look at that. I think about that. That was just my initial.
Yeah.
Was I wanted something like, I know, a strong tree on the front, that would hold its own and become part of the streetscape. But yeah, I mean, maybe, it could be any. I could pick a different one. I could.
Yeah, because the Norway maples absorb a lot of color. I find like dark materials. So.
That's fair enough. A good comment, actually. Yeah, I'll think about that and maybe think of something like a Gladitsia or something like that might have a lighter
or
color.
even the Katsuras.
We could flip it. Sure.
There's not enough around, and they grow bigger than you think sometimes.
Oh, yeah, they're pretty nice trees. Yeah. I like those very much. So, okay, I'll switch it.
And I think I was trying to understand why the need for this 4 meter, the fencing, and it's because of your retaining, it's how you have to retain your levels as you step down, correct? Yeah, and then, yeah, okay, I was just re-looking through that, and I don't have a problem with that. I think that's it's inevitable with this kind of development.
Yeah, we're keeping certain levels off the front. We're fixed at the bottom in the front, and then we've got to migrate in the middle, and that's where it catches us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again for your presentation.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. Tyler?
Yeah. Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you to the proponent for the presentation. I appreciate the continued efforts around infill development within the city core. So just right off the bat, I fully support the variances because I do think that some of these infill projects, or most of them actually, the desired use and the restraints on it through the setbacks and through some of the road dedications make it very difficult to actually meet, to meet setbacks. So I'm highly supportive of the variance, generally highly supportive of the project. So thank you. The only thing I would just echo is, and it was that staff comment, and again, it's hard to tell in the renderings, but I think the coloring and the textures in the design package do make a very vertical looking building. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, it's just very monolithic. And it may not come across that once it's built. It's just going by the packages, what's in the package. But I would just sort of echo those comments around if there is efforts there to address that through whether it's color, whether it's through different materials, and how they're presented on the building. I think it would go a long way to maybe addressing at least my concerns, but what I've heard from the panel members. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kyler. Yes, okay. So, first of all, I'm always really excited to see one of your projects, Joyce, because I'm always surprised at how sort of inventive you are at dealing with these sort of awkward, difficult sites. And as usual, you've done a great job in terms of trying to fit this building in. It's a great looking building, etc. But I have to sort of remind myself every time I come to the meetings what our purpose in the design advisory panel is. And our mandate is really to consider the building and its landscape plan in how it fits into the neighborhood context and community design guidelines. And yes, you're on a bit of a corridor and you're fitting those guidelines in terms of height and that sort of thing. But then I look at this site and I get a little concerned because it's very narrow. It's on a street, a whole block that's full of single family homes along that street, and low homes, and it's being sort of squeezed into that narrow space. And I drove down that street. I also looked at those homes, and they're well kept on either side. I don't really see the dereliction in them. So I think that's a little unfair. I think we have to think about that neighborhood as well, and how these kinds of buildings fit in. I'm all for infills, I think, and densification, but I think we also have to consider where we're setting them. And so I'm a little concerned about this project in that site. Nothing to do with the building itself. I think it's a great building. And if it is to be built, I agree with all the comments that have been made. But I get a little concerned when I see this kind of project being sort of slotted in there and people saying, well, oh yeah, it's all going to be torn down in a few years. It might not be. With the cost of houses, people are fixing up many of these old houses and choosing to stay there. So I think we also have to respect that. So that's kind of my comment on this on this situation. I don't know a lot about setbacks. I'm a little concerned when it looked in your plan like you're pulling the building up to one of the smaller older houses, which is likely sort of non-conforming because it's an older house. But then again, you're telling me, well, then those will eventually be torn down. So then your building's set more forward than the other buildings. So I'm not in favor of that front yard setback, partly because I think we have to sort of leave space on the street for wider sort of space that allows some space for between the buildings, the pedestrians, and the traffic. So anyway, I'm just wondering too if you guys at all talked to the neighborhood association, because there's a pretty strong neighborhood association in there, or the neighbors for that building.
I have not spoken to them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that would. Sorry, go ahead, Joyce.
Oh, okay. I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think any architect that comes into a site that's skinny like this and they see a 2 or 1.5 story house next door, always thinks about, like, how do I get this building to fit and work within the context of the neighborhood? I think the challenge here is really the zoning that's applied to this site. So it's like there's always going to be that first project, and it's always going to be a challenge because it's not going to fit, especially when the difference between a single family house and a 4-story building next door, they're never going to, and I think you'll see a lot of that on Halliburton happening as well, where the scales seem really off. I'm not saying that I think Kevin had a good point in the sense that we could go up another story and push the building, like squeeze the building and go up another story. But I think that to get out of that setback, and the challenge of that is then, okay, I'm even fitting more of the rules, but is that the right approach for the neighborhood? And is this the sort of transition? We're doing 3 stories with the center part, elevated to get roof access, to me seems a bit more responsible. But that's just sort of my feedback and my opinion and comment on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I see you're trying to work with what you've got and what you've been given, and I do feel that you have taken in certainly some account into that, like you've taken into account the form and shape to try and fit in with the neighborhood to some degree. And I agree with the comments here that you made about maybe doing something with the facade to sort of lessen it and try and lay it back, because with the dark color, it does come across as a kind of big wall that's been set up between these 2 smaller houses. So, maybe if there's a way you can play that down, that would help. Kevin?
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I would just say that we look at these at our packages for a matter of maybe 2 or 3 hours or whatever. And the applicant has spent months and months working on these projects, looking at different solutions to stuff. And I totally agree with Joyce. I think, they could easily reduce the footprint, move the house back and add another 9 feet on, be under the height restriction, have no variances. And there's very little we can do other than possibly opposing it. But I think by keeping the building over 9 feet under the maximum height restriction, and chances are in the future that somebody's going to knock down the house next door, especially the one on the right-hand side, and they could be put something up that's 9 feet higher than this building. So it's just it's inevitable that it's in the future, this is what's going to happen. And, it's easy to say we should protect these residences and stuff like that. But for the most part, it kind of forces their hand. Their property values end up going up, and they end up selling their house, and somebody will developer will buy it and put up some more units. It's the density aspect of it that she worked to 0.99 density. I think that was really important to me, and I think. I fully support the front setback, and which is like what I said with what Brad did and how we designed the front. And I agree with Kate. I would like to see the conservatory in that front corner. I think it really anchors the corner, and most of the traffic and pedestrian flow is going to be coming from downtown, and I think that'll just anchor that corner really well. So that's all I have to say. So thank you.
You're muted, Marie.
You're muted, Murray. Yeah.
Doug, I'm just saying that I'd give you the last word if you want to add something before the committee considers all these different issues.
Just 2 points. Jason, in your comment earlier about the live work on the main floor, that zone requires commercial, and in this case, live work is considered commercial and it needs to be on the first floor. So we were forced into that through the zoning. The second point I would like to make is, folks, we're not asking for a rezoning here. This is zone multifamily. So when I asked the planning department, why did you zone this all multifamily if you're going to start hammering us on these small lots and setbacks? And the city of Nanaimo Planning said, well, we're looking 80 to 100 years out. And it's all going to get consolidated and we're going to get multifamily. That's what we want. So, we are not asking for a zoning change here. The city designated these lots as multifamily. So why do we, I guess I'm caught with my team in a little bit of a difficult situation because I'm the only one of the few developers that is sticking it out to try to design 33-foot lots for fourplexes. Where everybody else would just bulldoze them and do a single family in the most walkable city, in the most beautiful city we got. So, I appreciate your comments and everything, and we have to be respectful of the setbacks, but we are not asking for rezoning in these applications. They're designed for multifamily.
Okay, understood. Thanks a lot, Doug.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see here what we have. I've heard a few recommendations in there. First of all, do we want, I guess, let's look over the recommendations first. Kevin, we've had a few comments on the front entrance. Would you like to suggest is the front facade or just the entrance? Maybe you could clarify what you were suggesting there, if you wanted to have that as a recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I basically had the one was adding the second electrical car stall station, and with the front, Joyce has heard my concerns. So basically, all I would say is look at the form and character of the front facade, and look at ways to blend the colors and textures better, something like that. I'm worried about and she knows from my comments that I'm worried about the color, how close the color is between the fascia paneling and the wall facade that's in behind it, and how close those colors are together. And I mentioned about carrying the wood hardy board panel up higher, but I can't, and I won't recommend that. But all I could say is look at the front facade to look at ways to improve that.
Consider ways to blend colors and textures of the front facade.
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay. And Kate, does that sort of fit with what you were suggesting?
Yeah, and I think between Joyce and the staff and Doug as well, I think they can work it out.
Okay. Kate, was there another point you wanted to make? The tree?
I think Brad heard us, and I don't think it needs to be written down. But I wondered can I make a general comment?
Go ahead.
Or I'll wait till you're done. I'll wait till you're done, actually.
Okay. And Jason, did you want to make a recommendation on any of your points?
I would just say that I'm not in support of the front setback, and not because it's a density issue, but because it's a public realm issue, and that's I'd be so that's for me. But like I said, if the rest of the panel is in favor of it, then I'm happy to abide by the majority will. So thank you, Madam Chair.
And Tyler, did you have any recommendations? No. Okay, so
None other than sort of what Kevin indicated, and I think several panel members are sort of circling around that. So a recommendation in that fashion I would support.
okay. So what about the variances then? Should we have a little discussion on that? We've got, I'm along with Jason, I'm not in favor of the front yard setback. There's a way of dealing with that in a different way.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Are we able to, because we're just saying where we stand and it doesn't really matter. So can we say that we're somewhat supportive of this variance, and this variance, and then there's a certain percentage in support of the other variance? And then the council will see that? Because I don't know how are we supposed to do it, because we're not exactly. Just asking.
I'm not sure, perhaps Lane, you would like to answer that.
Thank you, Madam Chairs. I think what we're looking for obviously is the mandate of the design panels to comment on form and character. So if the setback, has there's a direct correlation to the form and character of the building, maybe just providing a comment to that. So if, for example, the comment is trying to achieve, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a transition from the private to public realm, then maybe there's a recommendation around that.
Okay. So consider ways to shift to adjust the form and character of the building so it doesn't require the setback. I don't know. Kevin, you want to suggest something there?
Well, I think Lania nailed it on the head. Like we don't have to support variances. We don't have to say we're not in support of variances. And the way she said it, look at ways to improve the public realm in the front of the building. That sort of relates to what we're talking about. It'll be in the minutes that there was a heavy discussion on the support or not support of the front variance. But we can look at it different ways. But I think Lania, put it right, that I think maybe it should be a recommendation that look at ways to increase the public realm. Might be at the front of the building might be the way to do it, because obviously to increase it, you have to reduce the setback, and then they can work with city staff. Through you to staff, are any of these variances, I know there's certain amounts of variances for each of these that require it to go to past city council. Lania or Sadie, would you know that?
Certainly through the chair, the parking variance would automatically take it to council. And, okay. And then if just given the amount of variance required on the front yard setback, I believe that would as well. And certainly to Kevin's point, I don't want to take away the opportunity that the design panel can speak to variances, but whether they support or don't on a setback. But certainly if you wanted to provide a recommendation with that or in place of that, talking about that transition, that is your choice.
Yeah, I would just jump in and just reiterate that if they really can't move the building back because they won't get the parking in, even with the variance of just having 4 stalls. So if they move the building back to get within that variance, you're going to have to go up another story. So it's really pick your poison when it comes down to it. Do you want to go up another story, keep it under a height restriction still, or deal with a variance? So that's my comment. So thank you.
Tyler?
Yes, thanks. I'm trying to, and this would be, I guess, my fellow panel members, understand, I guess, the extent that the thinking is that the variance is impacting the public realm. I too very much in line with what Kevin just said. I think it's sort of pick your poison, but I'm also not seeing. I'm not seeing what other panel members are saying around a net loss to the front of the buildings as this has been proposed. So, someone it's comfortable. It's a direct comment to maybe Jason. I don't know. Trying to unpack that for me, I would appreciate it because I'm not getting it. And I would just, yeah.
Sure, I'd be happy to comment if it's okay with the chair.
Sure, go ahead.
So for me, like I said, it's not a density issue. It's not about height. It's not about number of units, because eventually there will be more buildings that are there that do take up the full height, and so that's not the concern. My concern is the relationship of the building to the street, and not the street as it currently exists, but the quality of the street when and if it becomes widened. But right now the policy, and that's why I asked that question at the beginning, if it's the intent to widen that street and create a new setback relationship with that public realm, and by respecting the setback, once the street is widened, it will create a consistent street edge. And it's not a commercial street. It's where the storefronts or the faces are right up against the public realm. So, and then by allowing the front to be so close to what will be the final street, and that's why I asked that question as well. The net result will be a 0.7 setback as opposed to 3.5 that the neighbors are intended to respect as well. So that's my concern. It's the quality of the street as opposed to a density concern. I'd be very happy if you went up an extra floor. I mean, you're allowed to. It's absolutely your right to do so. Again, that's other questions and conversations around what is appropriate or not. Again, what's appropriate now may or may not be appropriate in 10 years when there's new buildings on it. So it's not a density issue for me. It's a public realm issue.
Thank you for that.
How to phrase this here. So do we want to have somebody put forward a motion to accept the proposal as presented with the following recommendations? Add a second electric charging station, consider ways to blend colors and textures of the front facade, consider ways to increase the public realm at the front of the building, and to approve the variances or not. I'm not sure how to phrase that if we're not agreeing to the one. Kevin.
All I'll say is very rarely are we kind of opposed and like this, and especially with a small panel contingency tonight. I would just and I would definitely recommend to all the panel members to vote with your heart, vote properly. Don't just cave on anything. But I would say I'd be like to make a motion to accept the application as presented with the recommendations, the two recommendations of adding a second electric stall and looking at ways to upgrade the front facade to whatever recommendation we had for that.
Blend colors and textures of the front facade and leave out the other one?
And leave out the other one at this point in time, yes. So, and if I can get a seconder, if anyone wants to discuss, or we can just vote on it, and we can do another motion. So, thank you.
Do we have a seconder for it? Tyler? Any more discussion? Kate?
I just wanted to make a comment to the team once we are done our voting, if possible, if I'm allowed to.
This discussion periods you're allowed after a motion.
Okay. And what do we say about the variances then, Kevin?
Sorry, yeah, with support for all the variances other than like adding a second electrical stall to help out support the parking variance.
Okay. So the motion is on the floor to accept the proposal as with the two recommendations and the variances and vote according to your heart, as Kevin says. So we've had a seconder already with Tyler. So all in favor? All opposed? So there we have three in favor and 2 opposed. For the record. Okay. So there you go. That is it. We're done. And Kate, you wanted to add something there.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to add, because we see this team come forward many times, that I think we're a very level-headed, reasonable design advisory panel, and we don't present a lot of confrontation, and I just hope you understand that when you are speaking with us in the future. We all said we like your project and commend you for the development work you're doing in this city. And it's just our job to make sure it is the best it can be within what our parameters. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
And just express our concerns and ideas and so on. So thanks to the team anyway for bringing that forward, and good luck with it. Okay.
Very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So we have a second proposal tonight. This one on 5915 Latrell Drive, and Caleb Horan, city planner, will present this project. Go ahead, Caleb.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the second item on tonight's agenda is a development permit application DP 1261 at 5915 Metro Drive. The zoning is a residential core 1. It actually just received its final adoption for rezoning on Monday night, so this is quite timely. The proposal is for a 28-unit multifamily townhouse development, actually a stacked townhouse development, including micro units. The relevant design guidelines are the general DPA design guidelines. As part of this proposal, there is one variance requested, and that is for the maximum combined retaining wall and fence height to vary that from 1.8 meters to 2.3 meters. And we have the applicant architect VDA Architecture, I believe it's Kevin, who is presenting today.
Go ahead and share your screen. And thanks, Kevin. You want to unmute your mic?
There we go. You can hear me now?
Sure can. Thank you.
All right. Before we jump into the form and character, I'll just give a little bit of context and share my screen here. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can see that now. So this is the portion of, we're down here on Metro Drive, obviously between the Nanaimo Parkway and the Old Island Highway in here. And I'll just run through these really quickly so people can understand where we are. Dumont Road is up here, Dorian Place in here, and this is Metro Drive in here. This is our site here. This is a church religious site here. There's there's single family residential here, mobile home park over here, new single family over here. That's just recently been developed, and it's quite intense for a single family. And then a relatively recent multifamily development here called, I forget what it's called, something Village, Painted Village, that's right. Bird's eye of it, this is a site, it doesn't quite come up in this, but one of the major challenges of this site was dealing with the grading from this end down to here. There's several meters of grade fall across there. This project at the time of these satellites was partially constructed. There's still another 1, 2, 3 blocks that were about to go in, and obviously the multifamily wasn't in at that time. This development here, which we used as a precedent for how we would develop our site in terms of density, height, number of stories, and spacing, we sort of modeled the idea of and the approach for massing off of that site. This is, again, this is from Metro Drive here, that development in the back, the new multifamily in here, religious property there. And then one last one. So this is looking back, and there's a block here and a block here. Both of them face towards each other. Their primary views are not towards our site here. That's it now built. That's a more recent photo. So that's our site between those two blocks that hadn't been built. I'm going to use the actual architect or landscape drawing to walk through the how we organize the site. So there are currently two curb cuts on the site, one on the north and one on the south. We're abandoning the one on the south end of the site, bringing in a driveway down here to the back. There's surface parking down here. There's parking underneath this block. There's 4 blocks. Block 1 is off of Metro, 2, 3, and 4. The micro units are on the bottom of blocks 2 and 3. Every unit has an outdoor private area. For all of these blocks, it's rooftop. For all of those suites, it's rooftop. These are 1 bedrooms down here, and it's a covered outdoor deck in the corner there and there. And then the micro units have private yards. The materials board, there we go. Materials board, we're using hardy panel, aluminum windows, vinyl windows that are painted black, some cedar, some fiberglass doors that will be stained to look like cedar, corrugated, galvanized corrugated metal cladding, and then a porcelain coated cementitious product called Ceraclad to add some accents and some additional texture. And then simple black aluminum guards and wood fences within black aluminum frames. Pisa stone or similar landscape walls as well. We do have a SketchUp model, which I think really does explain this project best. So here you can see the driveway coming down and into the the garage areas for those units. Front doors next to the garage units, and then the micro units down there. And I'll just run through a couple of quick. So that's the view from Metro. The garbage enclosure is here. Looking down a little bit more from the front. Now for these blocks, we kept the garage where it was because we had to, but then we flipped the upper 2 stories in order to be able to address the street. Otherwise, we would have had bedrooms on the back. So we jiggled around the interiors so that we could really provide a strong street presence and a sense of identity for all the units that are facing the street. That's a little bit further down Metro, and you can start to see how much slope we have to deal with in this site. This is effectively from Doreen. This is the back from, similar to that view that we had of from the Painted Village. Now we've turned this block off so you can see the landscaping for the micro units. So we've got 5 micro units here. And then 5 micro units here. You can see it around here as well. You've got those 5 and those 5. So combined with that, the landscaping, the private yards that they have, and then these are the private decks for each of the units, along with this is the outdoor space for the 1-bedroom unit. So the lower, we stepped it down to these neighbors, so that, and didn't do a rooftop deck on that in order to help step it down. When we first went for rezoning, this was a trellis. Since we submitted for rezoning, we had, I think everybody will remember last July's heat wave, and we took another approach. There was a trellis over here and a trellis over here, and we decided to take another approach that these really could be 12-month a year roof decks, whether there was rain or sun or whatever, to really make them as usable as possible. So these decks both have a covered area and an open area to the sun. Just a couple of bird's eye views. Now, this, the area that we are asking for a variance in would be approximately, here's my lines here. It would be approximately this, and I can show you that's shown on the that area. That very roughly represents the 1.8 meter maximum. We are over in that corner. It's up to 2.3 meters here, and we just could not get the stairs and get the grading to work, and we're very, very limited because even though the code doesn't require the fire truck to come down here all the way, we could leave it up here. The city of Nanaimo has fire department has some policies about how close for a Part 9 building a fire truck has to come. So we were working with the fire department, which meant we couldn't steepen. This is the maximum steepness the fire department can park a truck on. And then they wanted, even though the code doesn't require it to have a turnaround, it allows you to, the fire department to back up on the street. They wanted a turnaround in here. So in order to resolve all that grading, this has been pushed down as far as we possibly could and meet the fire department requirements to access it from their point of view. So it just simply wasn't possible to push that down further. Now, part of that's one aspect that led to that. The other aspect is we do have a sidewalk coming up here, but although it is an 8% sidewalk through some portions of that. So it's relatively steep. I mean, it's not unusual in a city road for 8%. It would be considered steep, but doable. But we felt it was a better pedestrian access to give access on a sidewalk on that side, but also a path with stairs wherever we could. And we've done the best job we can to get that as close to the existing grade as possible. And we've only shown the landscape. We haven't gone into any depth on our SketchUp model on the landscaping, and I'll let our landscape architect talk about the landscaping. This is the garbage enclosure up here. It was located up here because we felt that that was the best spot for all the residents, because everybody has to pass through that zone. We could put it down here, and we do have one extra accessible parking spot, but that would mean that that couldn't be located here. And we've got an accessible parking spot here and one here that for it. So accessible parking does truly have access to all the units without any special ramps or lifts or anything like that. There is not accessible access to the micro units. I will let Sean from Ladder Landscape talk talk the landscaping. Sean, do you want to share your screen, or do you want to work off of my screen here?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. If you just want to scroll to the landscape plan, that'd be great. As Kevin mentioned, my name is Sean Leogreen. I'm a project manager with Ladder Landscape Architects. And I guess for the site here, our landscape design goal was to create an inviting residential scale centre place for this development and to connect residents to as much nature as possible. We have provided significant perimeter planting to provide screening of the buildings over time, and coniferous trees have been located at the end of driveways to reduce headlight glare from cars. Plant beds have been provided to buffer the internal grading as it transitions to the existing. The plant palette we have intentionally kept diverse and includes native, adaptive, deciduous and evergreen species to ensure both a year-round framework and seasonal interest. It also includes pollinator shrubs and trees to provide habitat value on site. While grading has been challenging on site, the north pathway, as Kevin had mentioned, is a pedestrian route free of stairs, and then there is also a southern pathway with that provides additional connectivity throughout the site. And even though the stepped building configuration, we were able to provide patios for the micro units and also the rooftop terraces. And these are great for providing outdoor living spaces essential to this project, and they provide opportunities for seating and such things as outdoor dining. We have chosen to have parking areas delineated with concrete borders and crosswalks with stamped concrete, and this provides a texture change that provides an indication that you're in a shared pedestrian and vehicle space. On top of that, we've proposed pathway bollard and wall lights, and they have to provide safe pedestrian and circulation at night. New fences have been provided where necessary, and existing will be retained to minimise impacts on neighbouring properties. And as Kevin mentioned, the waste and recycling is located near the front access of the site, and there is landscape buffer planting around the enclosure to provide some screening over time. In addition, there's a raised planter in front of the enclosure, and that provides extra landscape screening along the road frontage. Beside the enclosure, there's a short-term bicycle parking, and this is to promote alternative modes of transportation. There is approximately 11 existing trees that will need to be removed from site. This is due to the extent of the development, but the landscape plan proposes 59 new trees on and off site, which is a positive net difference of 48 extra trees this development will be proposing. We can look into retaining some of the perimeter trees upon city's request, but it is highly unlikely these trees can be retained due to the grade changes required on site. And the neighbours have expressed interest to have them removed. In summary, this is a new community, provides an exciting new landscape and increased plant diversity, connectivity, and a pedestrian-friendly environment. Do you have anything else to add, Kevin? Or?
Sounds good for me.
Yeah, so that completes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any of the panel's questions.
Great. Thanks, Sean and Kevin. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen now so we can see everybody, and then let the panel speak. Kate, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for your presentation. I actually have a couple of questions first before I make comments. My first question is regarding the building at the lowest part of the building at the end of the lot, the lowest part of the lot. And I was trying to figure out why it's built, why you've designed it that way with that space underneath. And it doesn't seem that it's because of parking. Is it, what's happening under that building? I guess is what I want to know. And why has it been designed that way? Because I find that a problematic.
It is actually because of parking. It is, I'm wondering if there's a drawing that I can, maybe I'm going to briefly share my screen again with you.
Yes, share it so we can see that.
So there's actually parking underneath here, and this, this dashed line is the building above. So we are getting surface parking or under building parking in that area.
Okay, thank you. I think I missed that. I was looking through the plans and I couldn't see that. Well, anyways, firstly, I like how you've laid out the buildings, moving down and created these sort of spaces between them, and the small, even though they're not accessible, the sort of small spaces you've created for those micro units, I think it's quite interesting. And I enjoy the relationship of the buildings to the street. And I think you have the planting palette is really nice and diverse. And I think I don't have any problems there, but this building that I pointed out is the building I have the most problems with. And it's that back view. And even though you said people are not looking at it directly, you showed us that they have this visual, the way the building's oriented, they have this line right up to your building. And it feels quite imposing. And I think there's not any, the siding, it seems to be all quite white and gray. So there's not much variation or difference or change. And it just feels quite imposing. So there's one thing I thought firstly too is to help mitigate the height and scale of that building to the property at the back is the landscape architect could look at putting in narrow columnar trees on that back edge, or because it doesn't seem like you have trees there, but I could be wrong. Or it feels like that facade needs to be given more attention to, because I think it is still an important view for those people who are living adjacent to you. So I suppose that's my main concern, and I would like to hear from Jason on our panel what he thinks, because I think he being the architect, but that's where I have a problem. So I'm going to see how this all fleshes out. And also the same with some of the side. I think there's maybe not enough variation. I think your front along Metro, it's just nice and it's a very good scale and enough interest. And then it gets a little bit lost on the sides and the back. So I'll leave it at that for now, Marie, and see where we...
Okay. Kevin, did you want to say something about that? Not our Kevin, but Kevin Clippens.
We're very limited in the planting on that back because there is a service right of way through there. So we can put some shrubs in there, but we can't put anything significant within that right of way. So there is definitely planting there, but there's nothing really significant there.
Thank you. I didn't realize, you may have said that and I missed hearing or didn't read that, but that's helpful to know.
Well, thanks for the clarification. Maybe we'll take that segue and let Jason speak up next then, since Kate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Let's say I really like this project, actually. I think you've done a really excellent job of mitigating the slope. I really like the inclusion of the micro units and getting a different type of offering into the neighborhood. And I like how you've taken advantage of that in-between space to really make the quality and the experience of the micro units really top-notch. So I'd just like to congratulate you on that. I like the fact that you've located the accessible parking at the top and the bottom to make it a more equitable access. I support the location of the garbage because of that. I wouldn't want to interfere with the parking and the access. I know that the city probably has concerns about some of the view, so you could, I don't know, maybe rotate it a little bit, keep it in place, but rotate it so the gates don't open directly onto the street. You could still probably maintain functionality, but that's a minor point. To Kate's point, when I first saw the kind of the columns and the exposure in the back, my first thought too was kind of like, oh, but I also there's something, from an architectural perspective, I really appreciate the purity and the platonic simplicity of the massing and the tectonics that you have here. Maybe you could address some of Kate's concern around whiteness and the parking area by, I don't know, on the end facades, creating some additional materiality at the base to create kind of a plinth condition, and that could take its cue from that overhang for the parking, maybe. But I understand what's driving it with the parking and the slope. So I don't have the same concerns, but I definitely understand the concerns. So otherwise, I think it's a very successful project, and I think I also appreciate the sensitivity to the massing to the neighbors that you're immediately against, and how you've shifted some of that open space for those units down below. So I think this is a very successful project. So thank you very much, and I am in support of the variance as well.
Great, thanks, Jason. Tyler?
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you to the applicant team. I have nothing to add. I think it looks to be a very good project in a very good location. So, supportive of the variances and have no real concern with the presentation or the development as presented. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tyler. And our Kevin?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Obviously a very difficult site. Anytime we deal with a slope, that 33-foot slope from front to back, you're dealing with issues and trying to get driveways and stuff to work. So I definitely congratulate Kevin and Sean for the efforts that they put into this project. I don't really have any main issues, but I like how the buildings are sited. I like how the units are staggered to create some interest with that. I like the quality of materials, the roof deck, the form and character. I really like the effort, Sean, you put into the pedestrian links getting around the site. That's always overlooked on a lot of projects that we have to deal with. With the rear elevation and what Kate and Jason just mentioned, I really have no issues with that. It's functionality over sometimes appearance, and really it won't be seen that much. So I don't have any issues with that. With form and character, the only two things that I was concerned about was one, I really like Kevin, the door panels you're putting in, the nice wood doors with the glass in them. But I really hope you might look at ways to individualize the units, either through the unit numbers that are on the door, on the walls or whatever, to help create something that, because all the units are pretty much the same in their materials and whatnot. So if there's any ways you can look at ways to individualize units, I think that would really help the project. Also, the only thing, and I would really like to hear, especially Jason's comment on this, from certain elevations, I like how the building looks from the street, but the other elevations, because of the way the panels are, to me anyways, and other panel members can tell me I'm wrong, but I find that the building, because of the mass light color of it, gives it a little bit more of an institutionalized look to it. And Kevin, did you consider, I know I love the way you've done the panels on the main facades, because they vary in size. Did you consider varying the color randomly on any of those panels? Like, it doesn't have to be, I would love to see a great contrast in color on it, but even a slight off-white color on some of those panels, just to break up, especially on the, I guess we would say, the longer facades.
That wasn't really explored. It's an interesting suggestion, and we'll certainly have discussions with the developer on that. We did want a very contemporary and crisp, clean look to it, and really the variation came in the buildings. They stagger, each one of them a little bit, but they also push. They also shift this way, which I think breaks up the facade quite nicely and quite successfully. So yeah, we were kind of relating. The intent was to really make these. The massing be the aesthetic to this, and that's why even for the roof over the stair and things, we don't have like a big overhang or something, because we're trying to emphasize the massing of it. But I think that's a really interesting suggestion on maybe doing some variation on the panels, and we'll take a look at that, because I think that is a really interesting suggestion.
Job staggering not only the heights of the buildings, but also the horizontal aspect of them as well. I think that works so well. It's just a matter of whether or not it needs it. And it's so tough to look at these in SketchUp and in elevation form because we don't see quite often shadow lines and stuff like that and how that can affect them. But I'll just put it out there for now. I'm not putting it as a recommendation unless somebody else wants to jump in on it. But all I would say is it maybe look at some of those panels. You could do it in a random pattern where you just go from a lighter color to a slightly darker color, or even go crazy and put something really like primary colors or something. There's a lot you can do that's really cool, but I'm not putting it as a recommendation unless somebody else jumps on board with that. I support the variance. There's no issues with that. With the landscape concept, Sean, the only things I would say is there's no trees. You're relying on the street trees that are going to be proposed for Metro Drive to you don't have any trees inside the property line. Is that correct?
That is correct. We had looked at putting in trees in the boulevard, but there's a few things that conflict with having trees there. Firstly, there is a overhead power line as well as a gas line, which restricts us to put trees within the boulevard.
Yeah, that's too bad because the trees they're proposing along Metro Drive there aren't very well. They're not very impressive trees, really. They're not going to be big trees, and so if that's your limitation, that you have the power lines there and there's nothing you could do, I guess there's nothing I could say to that. But I wish there was something you could do to beef that up a bit, and the shrubs and stuff you're putting in on the front on Metro, are they shrubs and bushes that are going to grow fairly like rhododendrons or anything like that, or?
Yeah, so typically I don't have specific species offhand, but what we typically do is have a sort of a hierarchy kind of approach where you have like lower shrubs at the front, so it creates a nicer pedestrian scale, but then closer to the middle, that's where we'll propose medium to large shrubs, so it will grow over time. And unfortunately, it's not shown in the SketchUp model because I'm sure it'll probably like bog it down and make it critically slow for Kevin. So, but hopefully that gives you an indication, Kevin.
Okay, thanks. And also, the wall lighting, the wall packs you're putting on the side, they're going to not be upward firing, they're just going to be downward firing lights?
Yeah, they will adhere with dark sky principles.
Perfect. And is there any room on the front of the units when you come into those drive aisles? I know your landscape areas there are very small, but is there any opportunity to put some like columnar trees there, like spire oaks or anything like that?
I'll speak for Sean on that because we directed him on that and didn't leave him enough room because we just couldn't get enough room on the site and get all the parking to work to meet parking stall width. So there just really isn't room to give him enough soil that a tree could grow. Now, we haven't done this. I would propose that we do some at the front entry, do something like pots, some a fairly significant shrub in some pots or something, but to actually get to native soil in there will be extremely difficult to give anything to Sean that he can actually work with.
Yeah, I've seen them put in places where they're put in amongst concrete sidewalks and paving, and they just have the metal grid going down through it, and they've done quite well. Kate might tell me wrong, and Sean might tell me wrong, but there may be ways to somehow kind of squeeze them in there. But Kate can jump in on that and prove me wrong on that. But so the only other thing is stormwater management, and I'm assuming that everything's going to run down to the easement in the rear, and you're going to use oil separators and stuff. Is that what the plan is?
Yes, we have the civil engineer, Scott Stevenson, here. If it's still there, you're on mute. There he goes.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Scott Stevenson with J. Anderson. Yes, stormwater management will be underground by our rock pits, but we're going to try to spread it out throughout the site, underneath the drive aisles between all the units. That way it'll better disperse into the ground is the intent. And everything will be protected with oil water separators and flow control manholes, and then into the rock pits, and then overflow to the city storm system.
Okay, thanks, Scott, and I'll talk to you tomorrow about another project.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. That's all I have. I think this is a really, really nice project, and aside from those minor things, great job, Kevin and Sean. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I concur with everything I've heard here. I was really pleased to see that you've thought about the accessibility. That was going to be one of my questions, because I saw a lot of stairs there, and then a handicap parking spot. I thought, well, where's this person going to go? But I'm glad that they can get into part of this. I realize townhouses like this, they're not going to be totally accessible, but I was a little worried that we'd have to be pushing wheelchairs up the driveway here, but you've thought of that and appreciate that. And I really love the rooftop decks and the fact that you've included covered decks particularly. I think we're seeing more and more of these rooftop decks, and the covered one I think is an excellent idea, because then you can do things like you say in all weather. And with global warming, even better. We'll be sitting outside a lot if we can, so really appreciate that. In terms of form and character, my concern's been expressed by the others here. Just again, some of the sort of repetitiveness of some of those back facades on the blocks, particularly block 4 with the parking garage under there. And that one really caught my eye. It just sort of starkly stood out, in part because I really sort of felt that maybe you're almost trying to hide those pillars. And I'm wondering if you've considered even highlighting those and letting them stand out and not be so shy. Add that color that you have on the front facades, the sort of gray color, and bring that up or something. And that it might just be a little minor touch that you need that would sort of really fix that back up a little bit. So again, I'd sort of just add to the comments about considering ways to vary some of those facades, especially those back facades. The fronts are great. I have no problem with them. So yeah, that would be my only suggestion, and a good project. So thank you. Now, okay, so I'm hearing here a couple recommendations. So consider ways to individualize the units, and also should we consider some ways of adding some variation in terms of the panel, like colors or forms in the panels, to provide some variety on some of the facades, or how do we want to phrase that? Kevin, do you have a suggestion?
Well, yeah, just have it open for discussion, because I brought it up and nobody else brought it up. So if nobody else feels strongly about it, we could have a recommendation that the applicant looks at ways to vary the color / texture of the main facades on all sides of the building, and let them work with staff to do it. Or if anybody has any other ideas, I'd be more than welcome to listen to it. So thank you.
Jason, did you want to weigh in on that?
I would just say, color, texture, materiality is just a consideration to help modulate the facade a bit, but I wouldn't make it a recommendation.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't make it a requirement, but
yeah,
consider. Yeah.
How did you phrase that? You said that was very good.
Go for it.
So
I think it was consider what is it, color, texture, or materiality to modulate the facades.
I like that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so then I'm hearing, was there any more recommendations? There was some discussion about the garbage, but I think everybody was okay with leaving that. I think this recommendation about considering color and texture can include the back of the 4th block. So that doesn't need to be mentioned separately. And is there anything else, any landscape issues?
Yeah, I just like to get Kate's comments on whether or not there's any way possible that some columnar trees can be squeezed in through the entranceways, and possibly even on the Metro street, and whether or not that would work. She's a genius.
No, I'm not. I think it would be very hard to get trees to successfully grow in the asphalt drive aisles at those entries. I think maybe their suggestion of a potted something that creates I don't even know if there's room for that, but maybe that could work. But it's very hard. You would have to get into using structural soil, and it's just very hard. And I hate seeing trees not do well. But I do think there is room. Kevin, I'm glad, Kevin, you mentioned Metro. I wasn't even paying attention that there was no trees there. I think there is room within your plantings, Sean, to have a smaller deciduous tree just to add a little bit of a canopy or a little bit of height. It could be because you're not right under the power lines in those planted boxes, so you could do something smaller, and I think that the project would benefit from that. You know, projects benefit from more trees always. So,
do you want to make that a recommendation, Kate?
Should we could keep it like we often do to consider ways to increase the number of trees and to find ways to include trees along Metro, because there are a number of small trees that would really work well there.
So consider ways to increase number of trees, especially along Metro.
Yeah.
I like that. Thanks, Kate.
Okay. So if that's it for recommendations, and I didn't hear any objection to the fence variance, so support for the variance. So can I have a motion to accept this proposal as presented with those 3 recommendations and support for the variance? Kevin, motion?
Yes, I would make a motion to accept the application as presented with those 3 variances and support for the fence variance.
And seconder? Kate? Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, all are in favor. Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation tonight, and good luck with it.
All right, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. So now Caleb, I think wanted a clarification on our vote on the first project. You still there, Caleb? There you are.
Oh, Lania can speak to this.
Oh, okay, thanks. Madam Chair, just we realized in the process of voting on the recommendation, Councillor Brown-Tyler is not a voting member. So we had 2-2, so that would mean the motion was defeated. But might we suggest to the panel that you could re-vote on the recommendation, and certainly it is up to the panel, but you do not have to speak to the variances if you're not comfortable with that. You could just make could just vote on the application as received and with your recommendations. Thank you.
Tyler?
No, just thank you for the clarity, finally, that I'm not a devoted member.
you feel like a lesser person, Tyler. Right. Okay, so how do we want to proceed then? We need to have we can't come in with a tie vote, we just have to.
A tie defeated, right? So we either have to try to do it another way where either that we vote against the variance, the front setback variance, or we turn a blind eye to it, or we do what we said. One of the recommendations was that we look at ways to increase the front realm or the front amenity space of the project, and that's just going to fall right on staff's lap, and they're going to have to decide how they want to deal with it with the applicant. So there's 3 options there. So I'll let everybody kind of jump in and see how they feel on it. So
is it possible to agree with everything but that one thing, so that the application can still move forward? It becomes a conversation with.
Yes, absolutely. We don't even have to recommend.
That's what I would. I think is the easiest way to go. The way we did it was one way to do it, but.
So all in favor of supporting, let's just say, okay, put them out, we want to remotion. The same.
I would say I'm in of everything except that one setback, and that's it.
Okay.
Is that acceptable?
Then, and everyone could decide if I can get a second. I would make.
Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Go ahead, you're the chair.
somebody make a motion to accept the proposal as presented with the recommendations and support for two of the variances and
Yeah.
no support.
I would make a motion to accept the application as presented with those recommendations and support for the height variance and the parking variance, as long as a second electrical stall was provided for parking.
Where did that come in now? That's different than we had before.
No, I think that was part
No,
of
that was
it.
before. Yeah.
That was one of the recommendations. Yes.
Yeah, it was one of the recommendations. So we can support the parking variances, but being that one of the recommendations is that we want, unless somebody disagrees, that I would like to see the second small car stall being electric as well. So it's kind of, if you're not supporting it, you're supporting it, but you're not supporting it kind of thing, as long as we get a recommendation. So
Is that fair to add that now that the applicant has left?
well, the applicant shouldn't be speaking right now, right? This is all a discussion amongst panel members, and sometimes they do jump in, but realistically, when you listen to council meetings, once the applicant is done, they leave, and it's all just amongst council members or whatever. And maybe Lania can give me some clarification on that, but
Thank you, through the chair. I haven't seen a variance with a condition with this design panel in my history here, but certainly it is the panel's discretion to deliberate and decide on appropriate recommendations and recommendations on the variances, and that is your deliberation. I don't think that the applicant needs to influence that at all.
okay, so then I'll make a recommendation that we accept the application as presented with those recommendations, with the support for the variances for height and the parking variances.
And just leave out the other one.
Yeah, leave out that part.
Okay. Seconder? Kate? All in favor? Okay, now poor Tyler's left out. All right. So
I get a vote at a later date.
So is it like, why can't Tyler vote? Like if he was chair of the committee, normally the chair only votes unless it's a tie, correct? Lania?
Through the chair, so in our terms of reference, it's outlined there that a member of council is on the panel, but they are a non-voting member. So it's outlined in our terms of reference.
Okay. All right, so we have one more item of business. I'm going to be away March 10th, so I need somebody to step in as chair. Now, Kevin, I asked you before, but you said you can't do a video one because of the phone, but
Sorry,
if you step in as chair, you might be able to just go down to the city hall and...
Yeah, well, if anybody else would like to jump in, I'd like to see more fresh blood doing chair work, and Marie, you've done a fantastic job, and I think we need to have more options, and because I did it for like 15 years or 12 years or whatever I did it, so I would really like to somebody could step forward and jump in, and I tell you, like Kate and Jason and Tony. All of you guys, I feel confident you guys can handle it, and it's not the easiest job. We have to jump in and do it, but I think if one of you guys can step forward, that would be greatly appreciated.
I think that's a good idea. We should have a few extra stringers here because we could both be away at some point, and so somebody has to step in. So,
how does Jason feel?
With all due respect, I'd like more than 2 months tenure on the panel before I do that.
I wonder if we could ask Tony. He's the next. Tony or Kate.
I can do it. I have a lot going on, and I'm afraid I won't have great focus, but I can do it if I have to.
Don't worry, I'll be here to call point of orders, even though I can't.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And Kate, you'll do a great job, and just keep in mind that you have all of us around you to support you, and there's if anything gets out of order, we always jump in. We're really informal, and you know, as far as committees and stuff like that, I've had many people from all over the country, architects, designers, and whatnot, say that our panel is so good compared to other cities. Like, I know Charles mentioned how Victoria, everybody's on a timer, and once the timer is over, up, you're done. And we keep this very informal. Meetings do run too long, but everything gets done in an orderly fashion, and the applicants appreciate it. And I get comments all the time over the years. So I think, Kate, you'll do just fine.
Oh, that or Lane, you have to make the request or decide.
Thank you. It's up to the panel to accept her as the acting chair, and certainly we can follow up with correspondence on participating that way.
Yeah, we kind of cornered Kate without Tony here, so I'm just thinking Tony could be approached as well. I'm sure he'd do a fine job too if Kate's too busy. But anyway, I'll leave that. Do you want us to vote on it, or do we just? Oh, we need to vote on it. Oh, okay. So I guess we have to decide.
I don't mind doing it. It'll be okay if maybe Marie can send me a couple notes or something.
Okay. We can chat if you want.
I'll make a motion to recommend that Kate is the acting chair at our next design advisory panel meeting.
Second.
All in favor? I thought you could go for that one.
Thanks.
Great. And kind of a motion to adjourn the meeting then. Kevin, seconded by Kate, all in favor? Okay. Take care, guys. Thanks very much.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye now.